Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome back to a very special video where today is the first episode of my Tremors franchise re-review series, not counting part 7, where today me and good old Trevor boy, make yourself known.
Howdy, everybody. It's good to be here.
We'll be talking about one of our favorite films of all times, the original Tremors. Of course, part of the Attack Pack, but bear with me. Yes, indeed. Very much so inspired by our ranking of the Tremors franchise and ranking of all Tremors the series episodes. So I just figured, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just do a review of the whole series. I'm in a Tremors mood. Let's do it. Plus, it's been 2.5 years since my reviews of my original reviews of the Tremors franchise, and I think my views on them have changed slightly. But I also didn't have a fellow Ultra Tremors fan back then, so this should be a fun series.
Strike while the iron's hot.
Yep. So I don't remember asking you this question before. What is your history with the Tremors franchise?
Okay, so my personal history really stems from the first two, because there for a little bit they were the only two movies we had, but it wasn't like a super long wait. I remember bits and pieces of the original movie on TV a lot. It always kind of fascinated me and also scared me, the one scene with the doctor and his wife. I didn't understand what was happening in that scene whenever I was a kid, and I also, for whatever reason, the graboid blood, that bright orange color always was a real striking visual to me. There's one particular memory related to the first movie that I have, and it was, I think I was in 3rd grade, so this was like 99, 2000. Me and my sister were like really into the first Jurassic Park. Like everything that we talked about had to tie back into Jurassic Park for some reason. And we just so happened to be watching Tremors one night on USA. We made a big old bowl of popcorn and everything, and was just having a good time. And because we had a Jurassic Park obsession, we compared the graboids and the tentacles like they were separate things. We compared the graboid to the T-Rex, and the tentacles were like velociraptors. It didn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in hindsight, but that's a little kid logic for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's probably my fondest memory of watching the original on TV. But my parents, or probably my dad, had recorded the first two movies. The second one was off of pay-per-view back when it came out in '96. And that was, Tremors 2 was actually the first one I saw, but I'll elaborate on that when we get to number 2. But the first one, the copy that he had, the tape, was a copy guard tape. So the quality, there was like a red tint to the whole movie. So I like to call it now, it was the Tremors on Mars copy, because everything had this red tint to it. It was really odd, but that was the only version of the movie that I could watch for the longest time. And then eventually the third movie came out, and that was a big deal back in 2001, because it was a new Tremors movie.
20-year anniversary. Holy shit.
What?
This year is a 20-year anniversary of Tremors 3.
Oh, yes, indeed. It's funny how time flies by, but yeah, so the third one was coming out. I was real excited because I just got into the first two properly. And not long after that, because the third movie was the first one I got on bought tape, eventually I got the first two on bought tape, and I still have those, and they're in pretty good condition, surprisingly. I mean, well, I'm pretty careful with my movies anyway, but those go way back. I'm actually going to show those off in an announcement at the end of this video, or it's related to an announcement I have at the end of this video. So yeah, anyways, I got those tapes, and then finally, whenever the fourth movie was coming out, it was the first one that I thought initially was going straight to DVD. And so I got a 2-pack, which had the fourth movie and the original movie together, and the version of the first movie that was with that release of Tremors 4 was that collector's edition DVD, which for the longest time was probably the best way to watch the original movie. And yeah, I've just these movies. This one, of course, included the first four, and the show have been in my life for a long time, my childhood, and I obviously still enjoy them to this day. I would say I'm quite the Tremors fan enough to where I like the nickname Tremor Thomson that somebody said I should be called.
Oh.
So yeah.
So my personal history with Tremors goes back a long, long time ago. I remember I was sick. I had the stomach flu. And me and my dad were living in this like tiny 2-bedroom apartment. This actually wasn't long after my parents had split up. So I had the stomach flu and I was just like laid out on the couch in the living room, and Dad was looking after me. And he stumbled across this scene from Tremors 2. I'll elaborate more on that when I get to Tremors 2. But that was my first exposure to the Tremors franchise. Then after that, there was Tremors 3 on TV. And those always stuck with me. And my introduction to the first movie, I would see the VHS tape and also the DVD for the first movie at like Bimart or Walmart, but everybody who I was with in the store would just never get it for me. Because nobody in my family is, except for maybe my brother, but he's that way because of me, is nearly as much of a movie fan as I am. And if they are, it's for their own very specific stuff that they like. Like my grandfather likes Westerns. Like he's a big Clint Eastwood and John Wayne fan. My dad, well, he likes Harry Potter and he likes Lord of the Rings, but he likes his dumbass football and hunting shows. My mom, she likes her Grey's Anatomy, and my mom's more of a TV show type of person, like which I can understand why. You get a lot of stuff out of a TV show. But, well, no, there's also my stepdad, who's also a really big movie fan, but he's also much more of a movie fan because of me. But yeah, nobody in my family is nearly as much of a movie fan as I am. So it wasn't until the good old days of Blockbuster, one of the very first trips where I wasn't looking for Godzilla movies, I went to my local Blockbuster and I found Tremors 1, 3, and 4. So I was like, oh my God, they have Tremors movies. They never had part 2 for some reason. They never, ever, ever had part 2. It was always 1, 3, and 4. So the first one that I rented, of course, was the first Tremors movie. Took it home. I sat down and I watched the shit out of the first Tremors movie. I was like, God damn, this movie is fucking awesome. This is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen in my life. So yeah, I watched the shit out of the first Tremors movie, and then finally my mom, because I was like starving for Tremors 2, because special features for the first movie would have the trailer for Tremors 2. And I'd rewatch the shit out of the trailer for Tremors 2, and I was just like, give me Tremors 2, give me Tremors 2. But again, I'll explain that when I get more to part 2. But a few years later, when me and my mom and stepdad had moved into their current place, I finally decided, because I had my first job, I decided to buckle down and get the goddamn Tremors Attack Pack with all 4 movies at the time. I didn't know the show was a thing. Or no, I did, but I just didn't get it. I wanted the first 4 movies. So I got the Tremors Attack Pack, and I've had this bitch ever since. Well, technically, this is the one that they made that included Tremors 5. I gave my original Attack Pack to my brother, but they're virtually the same. And yeah, the rest is history. The first Tremors movie is a goddamn masterpiece. It's one of the greatest monster movies ever made. It's just it's one of the greatest independent movies ever made as well. Overall, Tremors is a fucking
That's
masterpiece.
True. I frankly have lots of memories countless memories about watching this one and, of course, the other ones that I could get into, but we would be here all day.
Same. Though I will say my fondest memory was me watching this movie with my aunt, who was a surprising Tremors fan. She had the attack pack as well. And one night, she and I decided to sit down and first watch the excellent making of documentary of the first Tremors movie, and then jump into the movie itself. And just we had a good ass time. So yeah, that's probably my fondest memory. It's a very, very good documentary, yes. Which the goddamn attack pack does not include. Fuckers.
I do believe they brought it back for the Arrow set, which I'm going to dive into when I have a good amount of time because it's loaded with stuff.
Alrighty, so anything else you want to add before I jump into the plot?
No, I mean, like I said, we'd be here all day if I just kept on thinking about memories.
Well, let me grab something real quick. Okay. So, this is an independent movie, right? Tremors?
Yes, I do believe, although some details I don't want to mess up, so I don't want anybody to quote me on it, but I do believe Universal kind of picked it up.
Well,
but don't quote me on that, because again, the details I'm not 100% sure about.
Well, Tremors, the original movie had a $11 million budget. Well, Wikipedia says 10, but IMDb says 11. So let's just between 10 and 11 million. And while it was a minor theatrical success, making 16.7 million against a 10 to 11 million budget, this movie really found its audience on home video and very quickly became a sleeper cult classic hit. And of course would spin off a gigantic, well, not gigantic, but a successful franchise with technically 6 sequels if you count the show. Let's see. Okay, here we go. The plot of the original Tremors. Valentine Val McGee, played by Kevin Bacon, whom I believe at this time Kevin Bacon stated that this movie was a low point in his career.
Yeah, that seems to be a general attitude about monster movies and, well, really anything nerd-friendly at the time.
Maybe his ego was just too big because he had just come off of doing Footloose a couple years prior.
Oh, yeah, and a bunch of other stuff, too. He was quite big in the 80s.
And also Earl Bassett, played by Fred Ward, who kind of has done fuck all after Tremors 2, except for the third Crow movie and an episode of The Incredible Hulk show.
He's also in Sweet Home Alabama, most noteworthy. Also named Earl in that.
Our handyman working in Perfection, Nevada, which doesn't exist, unfortunately, an isolated settlement in the high desert east of the Sierra Nevada mountains. They eventually get tired of their mundane jobs and they leave for the nearest town known as Bixby. And as they leave, they discover the dead body of another resident, Edgar Deems, the town drunk, perched atop an electrical tower, still grasping the tower's crossbeams and his 30-30 Winchester rifle. Jim Wallace, the town's doctor, determines that Edgar died of dehydration, apparently having been too afraid to climb down. Later on, an unseen creature kills Shepherd Fred, old Fred, and his flock of sheep. Val and Earl discover the torn to pieces sheep, this movie is fairly gory for a PG-13 rated movie, but this was back when PG-13 was like diet R. Like you could show a whole lot of stuff. You just couldn't show tits, and you couldn't say fuck more than once or maybe twice. Oh yeah, and Val and Earl discovered the dismembered sheep as well as the severed head of old Fred and believe that a serial killer is on the loose. Two construction workers ignore Val and Earl's warning and are killed by the same creature, stabbing it with a jackhammer and causing it to tear ass underground and kill these two workers in an avalanche. And in the process, this avalanche blocks off the road, which is the only way in and out of the town. Val and Earl try to find help after warning the residents, but they find the phone lines are dead, and the rock slide has, of course, blocked the only road out of town. Out of sight, a snake-like creature wraps itself around their truck's rear axle, but is torn off when Val stomps on the accelerator and drives away, and is discovered back when they turn to town. And they presume that only one of these creatures would not be enough to eat Fred and his whole flock of sheep, so they presume there are more. Val and Earl borrow horses to ride to Bixby for help. They come upon Wallace and his wife's buried station wagon near their trailer, but the couple is, of course, missing, having been killed the previous night. As they press on, the enormous burrowing worm-like monster suddenly erupts out of the ground, revealing the snake creatures to be one of the worm's many tentacled quote-unquote tongues. Of course, being the very first on-screen appearance of the legendary Graboid. Thrown from their horses, the men flee with the monster in pursuit, but the chase ends when the creature crashes through the concrete wall of an aqueduct, dying from the impact. Splat. Rhonda Lebeck, played by Finn Carter, who's gotten herself into some shoplifting trouble recently.
It looks like she's half dead.
Yeah. Boy, she's not aged well.
Yeah.
A graduate
she's
student.
Been through some stuff.
A graduate student conducting seismology tests. And for those who don't know, seismology is the scientific study of earthquakes and the propagation of the elastic waves through the Earth or through other planet-like bodies. Stumbles onto the scene, and she deduces from previous readings that there are 3 other monsters in the area. Rhonda, Val, and Earl become trapped overnight atop a cluster of boulders near one of the graboids and surmise that the creatures hunt their prey by detecting seismic vibrations. The trio then find some discarded poles and use them to pole vault across some nearby boulders to reach Rhonda's truck, narrowly escaping the graboid in the process. After the 3 return to town, the worms attack and kill general store owner Walter Chang, played by Victor Lang? Victor Wong, excuse me. Let's see. Forcing everyone to hide on the town's various rooftops. Meanwhile, survivalist couple Bert and Heather Gummer, played by Reba McEntire and, of course, the legendary badass Michael Gross, respectively, manages to kill one of the graboids after unwittingly luring it into their basement armory, shooting the shit out of it, and Bert finally killing it with a gigantic double-barreled elephant shotgun. Damn! In town, the 2 remaining graboids start attacking the building foundations, knocking over a trailer belonging to Nestor he is standing on, and allowing them to drag him under the ground and devour him, like slurping him through a tire that he's sitting on with a burp and a scream. Ah! Realizing they must leave town, Earl, Rhonda, and Miguel distract the graboids while Val commandeers a track loader and chains a shitty semi-trailer to the rear. The survivors use it to try to escape to a nearby mountain range, and en route, both graboids create a sinkhole trap that disables the track loader, and the survivors flee to some nearby boulders for safety. The group begins to lose hope of escape until Earl gets the idea to lure the graboids and trick them into swallowing Bert's homemade pipe bombs. This successfully kills one graboid in an explosion of orange rotten pumpkin guts. But the last one, nicknamed Stumpy, spits a bomb back towards the survivors, forcing them to disperse as the explosion sets off and destroys all but one of the remaining pipe bombs. In a final act of desperation, Val lures the final graboid into chasing them to the ledge of a cliff and then blows up the remaining bomb behind it, frightening the worm into charging through the cliff face, where it plummets to its death, splattering orange rivers of blood all over the rocks below. The group returns to town where they call in the authorities to begin an investigation, while Earl encourages Val to pursue a forced and very much so last-minute bullshit relationship with Rhonda, thus ending the film. So, Trev, what do you think of this movie's story?
It is quite charming, classic, and for me, it never really gets old.
Well, this does have the very much so the formula of a classic 50s giant monster movie. You have, or yeah, it has the formula. You have the inciting incident, the investigation, the continuing body count, the reveal, discussion / exposition, more action scenes, kill one or two of the monsters, round up everyone, last-ditch effort to kill the monster, end movie, with a cheesy, tacked-on love interest to boot. It may seem a little cliche, and yeah, break it down to its bare moments, it's just a monster movie. But it's a really solid monster movie. Yeah, like what Trev says, it's very charming, it's classic, it's very entertaining, it never gets old. It's just so well done. It's kind of like how Decker Shadow describes it as. It's a popcorn flick. Just very well salted, well buttered, very warm, very tasty popcorn.
And simultaneously its own unique flavor.
Yes.
Which is why it's so memorable.
Huh?
Which is why it's so memorable.
Agreed, yes. I noticed something about this movie on my most recent viewing that stuck out to me in very much so a positive way. I don't know if the filmmakers were intentionally doing this or if it was just coincidence. This movie is kind of similar to Jaws. Not just because it's a Universal movie, but just the concept of it and its pace and its structure, and also in its monster as well. It's pretty similar to Jaws. Which is a good thing, though, because it doesn't feel like a ripoff, and it doesn't even feel like it's inspired, maybe not intentionally. It just is very, very similar to Jaws, but that's a good thing because Jaws is a great movie.
I would agree. Jaws might have a bit more gravitas because that's kind of something that Spielberg adds to his movies. And I like Ron Underwood, especially his remake of Mighty Joe Young. But
he did do that, didn't he?
He did. He's also most famous for doing, I think, both City Slickers movies, or at least the first one.
I never saw any of those.
Neither did I. But that seems to be something that is brought up often with his. Also, to Nick's point, the posters for Jaws and Tremors are very similar.
I never noticed that until Trev brought it up, but yeah, they are pretty similar. Though it's not the actual graboid, It's just one of the tentacle mouths that comes up towards the surface. They didn't use the actual graboid until Tremors 4 of all movies.
Well, and that fits along with the movie because at least for like the first act, we don't know that there's more to it than the tentacles that we see. We actually think they're just separate beings, but they're actually part of one whole.
Yep. So, since Trev is my guest, he can start with his pros. Brace yourselves, people, because we got a lot of pros to talk about.
We do, and we probably will overlap. I have 10 pros.
I have 11.
So, yep. Pro number 1 is the monsters. By far the most lasting impact of the franchise. Quite unique. Some people would probably say there's some inspiration from the cryptid the Mongolian death worm.
I don't think it was intentional, but there is some similarities, yeah.
There is, but at the same time, death worms aren't known for having tentacles, which look like a cross between a snake and a slug. That's what it's always reminded me of.
Mm-hmm.
There's really nothing quite like graboids, and as we continue on, there's an interesting development to their evolution that is also unique. It evokes, caterpillars, but it's not quite the same. They're just, the word that comes to mind is unique. It's a little bit frustrating. Well, not like in a super bad way, but in looking for something to cross over with Tremors, you realize that there isn't quite anything like these monsters, and they have their own unique advantages that, at least for me, it's kind of hard to compare with other things. Maybe the ants from them, if you did an offshoot where you crossed over where those two were in competition with each other, that would be interesting.
That'd be kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that them is too similar to Tremors. For one thing, them doesn't have the amount of humor that Tremors does. Not that Tremors is overblown with it, as I'll elaborate here in a minute. But these monsters are, in my opinion, one of a kind. There are things that have slight similarities to them, but what they have makes them stick out from the vast menagerie of creatures in cinema.
Mm-hmm.
So, they are by far the best thing about this movie and the rest of the franchise. So, pro number 2 is the characters.
Yes.
Very, very relatable. Well, I'll just go ahead and say my third pro, because these go together. The cast and the characters work in tandem with each other.
Mm-hmm.
They're the actors, for me at least, these actors are known for the characters that they played in Tremors, aside from Kevin Bacon, because Kevin Bacon's been in other things.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Michael Gross. Michael Gross, besides this, was known for playing the dad on Family Ties, but I think a lot of people my age and probably younger, if they're aware of Tremors, they probably think of Bert whenever they hear Michael Gross. It's probably the role that has most defined his career.
Later on in the franchise, not so much in the first movie, but definitely later on in the franchise, that definitely defined Michael Gross.
That's true, and he's also memorable in this. I mean, he probably has several of the good scenes in the movie. He makes an impression just because of the nature of the quirky character that is Burt Gummer. But he has one of the best moments in the movie, both like for effects and the suspense and everything, whenever the graboid breaks into the Gummer's basement.
Which is awesome. I'll talk about that when I get to my pros, but that scene is fucking awesome.
Well, and continuing with the cast and the characters, Fred Ward, he's done a few other things here and there. Like I mentioned, probably aside from Tremors, I remember him most for playing Reese Witherspoon's dad in Sweet Home Alabama. You can't ride 2 horses with one ass, Sugar Bee. That's a famous quote from that movie, from him anyway. He's also Earl in that. But whenever I think of Fred Ward, I think of Earl Bassett, and it's probably the best thing he's done, at least as far as I'm concerned. Rhonda is the start of a nice trend with these movies, in that the love interest, or well, not love interest, but the female lead is a capable, intelligent, contributing factor to the plot of the
That's
movie.
not an SJW force down your throat bullshit either.
No, not at all. One could argue that the 1950s movies from which this kind of sprang, as Nick was pointing out, one could say that trope started with those movies from the 50s, but at the same time, they also kind of poked fun at the idea of a capable female protagonist. Here, by 1989/90, that wasn't quite the case anymore, and I feel that Rhonda stands out in that regard. And also, this was, I believe, Reba McEntire's first movie, and also a memorable role for her, even though she never came back, as we'll probably elaborate on slightly with Tremors 2.
I remember her saying not too long ago that she'd be down to return to a Tremors movie.
Which would be interesting. The funny thing is, with both her and Kevin Bacon, is I don't know if they realize what the franchise has become in their absence. Not that it's like in spite of them, or like despite them or anything. It's just that the franchise did move on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to say that Val couldn't come back or Heather couldn't come back, but I don't know. I would just try and fill them in on, okay, this is what's happened in your absence. That's what I would do if I was shepherding their return.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, to wrap up about the characters in the cast, even the characters who either get killed off or play a much more minor role. It's always stuck out to me, Miguel, played by Tony Gennaro, I think is his name. It always has been funny to me that he referred to the tractor as like a person whenever they use the tractor to distract the one graboid, or actually both of them, I think. That was a funny little quirk. And of course, Walter.
How about the tractor? Walter's little tractor? Start him up.
Let those things put him around if he like that noise. And also Walter Chang, played by Victor Wong, who has popped up in a fair share of John Carpenter movies like Prince of Darkness and Big Trouble in Little China, to name a few.
He's probably the only character in this movie I don't really care for, mostly just because I find him to be kind of annoying.
He is irritating, although he did give us the name for the graboids.
True, yeah. Graboids, no, that's it. Graboids. Jesus, Walter, gonna be sorry if we don't give him a name.
And, yeah, just very memorable, aside from the main cast. And, you know, to be a segue, I'm going to bump this up on my list. The quotes in the movie. So I guess that's my pro number 4.
Yeah, this movie is very quotable.
Very quotable. Val and Earl have a lot of great moments. Just the very down to earth. Everything is related to their way of living. Whenever I think of people playing rock, paper, scissors, I think of this movie and Tremors 2. That's just how ingrained the concept is to Tremors for me. I'm trying to think, because there's so many great quotes, and we just did some. Yeah, I'll bring them up if they come to mind. But yeah, the quotes in this movie are. It's just one of those things, you know something is good or it made an impact whenever you hear it constantly referenced.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, pro number 5, I would say, is the effects. Some of the best practical monster effects in the genre. This was at the tail end of the 80s. The movie was released in January of 1990, but at the end, the copyright is 1989, so it's kind of technically an 80s movie. So it kind of flows into that whole trend of the 80s, where the practical effects were just so noteworthy. There's lots of great miniatures. There's lots of great full-sized graboids, this is probably the movie where they appear to be the most realistic, honestly.
Also, is
Because
the
after
only
this-
installment to the entire franchise that does not use CGI.
Yes, indeed. For one thing, because it was barely taken off at the time, and people or studios considered it a risk, potentially.
Though, correct
plus,
me if I'm wrong, did they ever use stop motion for this film?
I don't believe they did. It's just purely miniature puppets.
Because I could have swore when it's revealed that the snakes are the tentacles of the graboid when it's first revealed, the way they move out and slither, it looks kind of like stop motion.
Yeah, I noticed that too. If it was, for whatever reason, it hasn't been mentioned in behind the scenes stuff that I've seen. They've mainly focused on miniatures or full scale animatronics for the graboids, which this is probably the most noteworthy thing that Amalgamated Dynamics, Tom Woodruff Jr. and Alec Gillis, for you monster nerds out there, they've designed a bunch of creatures. They basically took over Alien and Predator after Stan Winston. This is probably their most noteworthy original creation that they made, and they did it for the first 3 movies. But yeah, the effects definitely they complement the uniqueness of the monsters, and hands down the most memorable things about the movie.
Agreed.
The music. So I believe this is pro number 6 or 7.
I think 6.
Yeah. Okay. So the music, not super spectacular, but this was also one of the rare times where Tremors had like the very beginnings of what you would call a theme, and it was referencing the sound that a seismograph makes whenever it's basically sensing vibrations, or at least the sound from the score soundtrack was used in association with the seismograph. And I just thought that was an interesting correlation there.
Ernest Troost did the music for this film.
Yes, and apparently there's a little featurette on the Arrow Blu-ray that I'm going to check out again whenever I have the time. But yeah, I think the sound effect that I'm referencing that kind of, to me, is very associated with Tremors, it pops back up here and there in Tremors 3, probably because they went back to perfection. But yeah, to me, the music in this movie is... again, it's not going to knock your socks off, but it is fairly memorable.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, you know, I usually like the music in movies anyway, so of course it stood out. Moving right along, number 7, the suspense creep factor of this movie is pretty good, especially whenever we're leading up to it, leading up to the reveal of the first graboid. I think Tremors 2 beats it, and we'll probably elaborate on that for sure.
Very much so. But it's a good start.
It is a good start, and it's pretty consistent right up till Val and Earl run across the graboid in full. And there's one other kind of eerie moment that occurs whenever we realize that people are trying to get to the valley, but they've been ate up. So yeah, this has always been considered a horror comedy franchise. It definitely leans into the comedy as the series goes on. But I think the horror elements are definitely evident with the first movie.
Yes.
And it reaches its peak with the second. And again, like I said, horror comedy. So second to last pro here would be the humor. The humor of this movie, again, it is surpassed to a degree by later movies in the series, but it is still quite memorable. I think that's it's a hard thing to pull off horror comedies because they either lean too much into the scare factor and they neglect the comedy, or vice versa. This is one of the cases where I think it blends pretty well.
I can think of 2 movies off the top of my head that do it better, but yeah, I do agree. One being An American Werewolf in London, even though I think that does work more as a horror movie, but there are some pretty funny moments in it. And also
Indeed.
Shaun of the Dead.
Mm-hmm.
That movie, in my opinion, is the number one greatest horror comedy of all time. Because it perfectly balances being scary and also perfectly balances being funny as fuck.
So there's at least 3 examples for everybody. And so my last pro, and this works out to 10. I think I got a little confused there because I rearranged whenever I was talking about it. But the last pro for me is the legacy of this movie. Again, it actually had its 30th anniversary last January. One of the few good things of 2020, I guess you'd say. And the legacy of this movie, it's really the only franchise that it didn't really catch on in theaters, but it definitely caught on in the home video market.
Oh, yes.
Which, it doesn't happen all the time, but this is definitely one of the most noteworthy examples of that. And it continued direct-to-video, but I would say probably hands down this is the best franchise that has continued in the direct-to-video format, because most of the sequels, well, all of them, even the ones that, well, there is one example that we'll get to at the end of this, but most of the sequels are pretty exemplary examples of direct-to-video monster movie sequels, because you usually don't see direct-to-video sequels that are really all that good, and this franchise has delivered consistent quality. Maybe it's not for everybody, but the fans, they're usually pleased with the quality of these further sequels. So yeah, I'd say the legacy of Tremors is unique in that, aside from the monsters not being really comparable to anything else, the franchise itself is at the top of the pile when it comes to direct-to-video related stuff.
Yep, I would definitely agree. The only other one that I can kind of think of that sort of comes close is the Child's Play franchise, which ironically is another Universal series now. Well, it's both MGM and Universal, but a majority of the franchise is under Universal. And while that one only has 2 movies in direct-to-video format, it still is very similar. Like the Curse of Chucky and Cult of Chucky still do feel right at home in the Child's Play timeline. Fucking motorcycle. And they also have a consistent, good Universal direct-to-video quality, just like a lot of the Tremors sequels. But I would definitely agree that the Tremors franchise is easily the greatest direct-to-video monster movie franchise ever. There's no other franchise out there that's this consistent, that has this much care and attention put into it. And yeah, I agree. Anything else to add?
Here we go. I remembered the quote that really sticks out to me. Pardon my French. Whenever Earl or in one case Rhonda, they swear. Whenever I usually use that in real life, and I say "pardon my French" after I've had an explosive swearing cuss fest, and then I punctuate it with that, and it came from this movie.
Actually, me being the dumb, ignorant kid, whenever I heard that, I asked, "Are swear words French words?" No, it's just an expression. Okay. Alrighty, so like I said, have 11 pros, so strap yourselves in. Pro number 1 is the characters. Every character here is well acted, well written, and well cast. Michael Gross does an amazing job as Burt Gummer. He does get better in the franchise, but here he does have a very good start. Just like all of his personality quirks are set in stone in this first movie. He's a wannabe military junkie that is, a big gun nut. He's a big survivalist nut. Honestly, I would love to have a person like Burt be in my life, but it turns out I'm becoming Burt in everyone else's life around me. So there you go.
Might
Reba,
as well do it yourself.
huh?
Might as well do it yourself.
Yep. Reba McEntire does okay. She doesn't have that much to do in this movie, but she does fine whenever she's on screen. The chemistry between Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward is pitch perfect. You totally buy these guys as having work together and bickering and their friendship quirks and all this stuff that they showcase throughout the film, like their rock, paper, scissors thing. Their chemistry is 100% believable. It kind of reminds me a little bit of classic Riggs and Murtaugh, like when those two are just playing around and being police version of Laurel and Hardy. You could say these guys are like monster hunting Laurel and Hardy. It's pitch perfect. And the rest of the cast does a good job. A couple of characters are there to be cannon fodder for the graboids. And then, of course, you have the little bastard who plays Melvin. He's just there for comedic relief and to get splattered in the face with orange rotten pumpkin guts.
Or be given an empty gun.
Or be given an empty...
Oh, Bert, you
asshole. Bert, you asshole, there's no bullets in this gun. Am I the only one who thinks he had a little bit of a lisp?
Yeah, he had one. It's kind of it's funny because usually you associate that with like little kids, and he's like a teenager, so.
I don't know, man. They're too fast. You can't run no way. Bert, you asshole, there's no bullets in this gun.
Yo, Melvin, this will make him think twice.
Hey, Melvin, want to make a buck? Eat it. Okay, so I may as well just get into this. So yeah, the characters are all great. They're all perfectly cast and well acted and well written. Pro number 2 is the humor. Now, this movie is not like out and out, like side-splittingly gut-wrenching funny. It gets close to that throughout the rest of the franchise, but the humor is just very subtle. It again, it's nothing that'll make you split your sides laughing, but it is like you'll get a lot of snickers and chuckles out of it. Like the eat it, and all the witty banter between all the characters, and the pardon my French. There's just a lot of situational and borderline kind of slapsticky humor, especially like when Melvin gets pelted in the face with graboid guts. Yeah. Oh.
Look on his face.
Yeah, there's a lot of good subtle humor that'll just have you snickering like crazy. So yeah,
it doesn't overstay its welcome.
No, it doesn't. Thank God. If they leaned more into comedy, I think that would have hurt the movie just a little bit. It's just the perfect right amount of humor to provide some levity in the situation. It's great. Pro number 3 is the setting. Now I'll throw in setting and cinematography as 3 and 4. The setting and cinematography for this movie are both great. That's one
that that's one that I forgot the setting. So that's one that I forgot to mention setting. Go ahead and elaborate.
Now I don't know if all of this was 100% legit, but the town of Perfection totally is believable as being just a small settlement out in the middle of buttfuck nowhere. And it looks great. It looks older. It looks weathered. It looks, for lack of a better term, deserted.
It's not quite as intense as The Thing, but it is almost a similar situation, except instead of the Antarctic, it's a desert. And also, since I forgot this, I'll say real quick, this movie forever kind of made me fascinated with desert landscapes, which some people might find as odd because it's hot and, you know, there's not a lot out there, but there's just always a mystique that deserts have had ever since I've seen the Tremors movies, particularly this one.
Agreed. Yeah, I very much so agree. I'm a little bit fascinated with desert landscapes myself. There's a part of me that would like to live in a desert, but I don't like the heat. So, but yeah, the setting is very, very good. And yes, it is very similar to The Thing, and also Jaws being out in the middle of the ocean.
True. All Universal, by the way.
Yeah, all three Universal. They're good at doing. Again, like, what the fuck is up with Universal in the last 10 or 15 years? They've just been dropping the ball. Anyway,
Get back to your roots, y'all.
Huh?
Get back to your roots, y'all.
Yeah, no shit. And the cinematography is very good too. There's a lot of wide shots showcasing the desert landscape, and it's very beautiful to look at. It does make you want to go out in the middle of nowhere and just escape from the world and experience a kind of peace and tranquility with nature and being isolated. It's great. Pro number 5 is the suspense. This movie has some excellent suspense. It's not like nail biting or on the edge of your. Well, it's kind of like it keeps you on the edge of your seat. You never really know what's coming, and there's lots of really good build up. And I wouldn't necessarily say this movie is slowly paced, because this movie is not. It's an hour and 36 minutes, and it's not super fast paced, but it does always move along at a brisk pace. But it does still know when to take its time and give you some build up and give you some suspense and just keep you guessing, like, wait, what the hell's coming? What the hell's coming? And it's very well done. It's not overly done, thank God. Like, if this movie was 2 hours long and they implemented some slow ass scenes, I think it would have hurt the movie a little bit, especially with admittedly how kind of little screen time that the graboids have, which thankfully they fix with another element, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But the suspense for this movie is really, really good. It's surpassed in later sequels, especially part 2, but it's a great start what they have here. There's lots of good buildup and making you wonder what the monster is and what it's going to look like. And when it's finally revealed, it's a doozy. It's a good payoff. And they also reveal the monster, like, what, 25 minutes into the movie or so?
Yeah, it's not very long.
Thank
but
God.
there's still a good build up to it. It's not rushed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so it's not quick, but it's not rushed at the same time either. It's just perfectly done. Okay, so let's talk about this now. Pro number 6 is the Jaws formula. They pulled a really good Jaws with this movie, where, you do see the graboids a decent amount. They're kind of simple monsters, so there's not like you can show a good chunk of the creature but not show the full thing, but you still can see what it looks like in your head. And also they do show what the entire body looks like. It's just a dead one. Hey, check this out. I found the ass end. Urgh. Jesus, we really caught something here. Man, that's one big mother. Let's see. Oh yeah, so they do a lot of really good Jaws motifs. Well, not really motifs, but they do a good job of implying the monster's presence. Huh?
That's what you're thinking of, tropes.
Okay, yeah, they implement a lot of good Jaws tropes. They do a good job at implying the monster's presence rather than showing it. All the POV shots of the graboids skulking around the desert and the desert humps that go all throughout the desert, and also when graboids go under things, they either topple over or they vibrate or they get smacked as the graboids go by. It's a good
perspective shot.
Huh?
And the perspective shots, like whenever somebody's being chased.
Yeah, like I said, the POVs. Yeah, they do a really good job of implying the monster's presence, but they also show you just enough to really remind you, yeah, there's the monsters. Like when the underground shots of the graboids tunneling by. There's 3 or 4 of those throughout the film, and they all look good. And I also like that there was that one scene where it just looked like a whale breaching the surface and then going underground or going underwater. They do that with one of the graboids too. Actually, they do it once or twice.
Well, it's funny you make the Jaws comparison because definitely something that Tremors has over Jaws, despite their similarities, is the fact that unlike the shark, which was hidden because it was constantly
breaking down
or falling apart, yeah, the graboids in this look far better, of course.
Yeah, which is why there's a part of me that does think that Tremors is the better movie.
Well, they're both good, but yes, I do prefer Tremors.
Yeah, probably same. It's just an overall better franchise. Like the first two Jaws movies are good. The last two, you can kind of take them or leave them. But, of course, we all love the entire Tremors franchise. Also, Tremors is a little easier to watch than Jaws. Nothing wrong with Jaws, but with Jaws, you either have to... Huh?
It's like I said, there's a bit more gravitas and, I guess, seriousness to Jaws. There's humor in Jaws, too, but...
Yeah, there is, but... Tremors is just more fun. Like, you can just sit down and watch Tremors anytime and any day and have a blast. With Jaws, you kind of have to really sit down and pay attention to the movie and then just let it sink its hooks into you, so to speak. Which isn't bad, but just time and place. But anyway, so yeah, what?
A mood piece.
Yes. So yeah, the Jaws tropes in Tremors are very, very well done. And I don't think it was due to a limitation in the effects. Well, I think it was a little bit of that, but it was more just the filmmakers wanting to do a good job of doing a tell, don't show type thing. But they still show enough of the monsters to not make you feel, well, you have this awesome monster, but you barely show the fucking thing. That's not the case at all. They show the monster just enough. Which will lead me... Go ahead.
They also, sorry. They also, early on at least, they didn't want Universal to advertise it as a monster movie. They wanted that to be a surprise whenever audiences went to go see it. But then that would beg the question, okay, how would you sell something like this without saying that it's a monster movie?
Fair point. And also, fun fact, one of the working titles for Tremors actually was Land Shark. And then after that, it was Beneath Perfection. And then they finally settled on Tremors. So this will lead me into pro number 7. The graboids are fucking awesome. Aside from Tremors 5, though that's for a different reason because they're kind of showing a new breed of graboids, this is definitely where the graboids are at their apex of being a big threat. The graboids definitely feel like actual monsters, threatening giant monsters that are actually scary and you don't want to fuck with. But overall, the graboids in this movie are really, really fucking badass and awesome to watch. Very entertaining, very well designed, which not getting into the effects just yet, but yeah, the graboids in this movie are just fucking spectacular. They're so fun to watch. They're very entertaining, and I like that they implement that these are intelligent animals, and they do a good job of kind of like with the shark and Jaws, showcasing that they do have minds of their own, and they're not just mindless beasts.
The longer they live, the smarter they get.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, it is pro number 7. Yeah, nothing much to say. Again, they're not super interesting in the first. Well, they are, but not super interesting. Like kind of like with the xenomorphs, it's difficult to talk about one form of the graboids without talking about the rest. But I do think they get even more interesting as the series goes on. But to focus on one stage of the graboid life cycle, of course, being the graboids themselves, the graboids are awesome, and they certainly are the most physically intimidating of all 3 forms of the graboid, and it's great. So yeah, I talked about the humor. So pro number 8 is the score. It, again, like with what Trev said, the score is nothing super special, but it does make this movie feel like a bit of a classic Western type movie. There's lots of ukuleles and there's lots of harmonica tunes. But there's lots of really good drum beats to make the scenes more action-packed, entertaining. And there's a lot of low music to make the more suspenseful scenes creepy. So, again, nothing super noteworthy and nothing Oscar-worthy by any means, too. But the music score is quite good, and it fits this movie's tone. That's all I have to say about that. Pro number 9 is the action scenes. Action scenes are very, very entertaining. The music and the editing certainly help too. All the chase scenes are very entertaining and well done. The couple shootouts that we have are fun. The actually, no, that's about it. All the action scenes are shootouts and chase scenes. They're all very entertaining and easily probably the best scene in terms of an action scene in this movie is when the graboid invades Bert and Heather's basement. Watching Bert and Heather unload all of these guns into this one graboid, and it finally takes a goddamn mini cannon to finally put the bastard down by literally blowing out the back of its head. Because when Bert takes it's the second shot when the bullet finally blows out the back of the graboid's neck until it finally just slumps over and starts bleeding out. It's very, very good. And there's no music. Soon as the graboid breaches in, or we know there is music. Though towards the end of it.
There's music, right? There's music right as it dies.
Yeah, right as
silent the rest of it.
Yeah, it's fucking awesome. The only well, no, I'll get to the effects in a minute. There is one moment that kind of took me by surprise at this most recent viewing, but it was really short, so I'll get to that in just a minute. But yeah, the action scenes are very entertaining, very well done, very engrossing, very well edited. They're just fun to watch.
I concur.
Pro number 10 is there's some good graboid kills. Now, there's only 4 graboids in this movie, and the graboid kills get a little bit more extravagant as the rest of the series goes on, but here they're very well done. Though the first one just smashes itself into a retaining wall, but still when it lulls out, there's a great aftermath with all this orange goo and slime oozing out of the graboid's mouth. The second one is shot to pieces by Bert and Heather, and that's a great spectacle. The third one is blown up after swallowing a pipe bomb, and there's this great geyser of dirt, rocks, and orange rotten pumpkin guts, which actually is true. To do the graboid guts, they took pantyhose and stuffed them with pumpkin pie filling. And, of course, with the intense heat and being left out of refrigeration for so long, they eventually did start to rot and decompose and start to smell like actual rotten guts, which they do state with the graboids that they do stink. The graboids have a powerful stench, so I'll bet some of the reactions to smell on set were actually not fake. They're actually real because they were smelling them rotten pumpkin filling. But it's really gooey and goopy and splattery, and that's a great spectacle. And then, of course, the final graboid, Stumpy, as it plummets out the cliff and falls to its death, as it comes crashing down to the ground, it just explodes into this giant splash of orange goo, and it's so fucking awesome. Just and you literally just have rivers of orange blood cascading out of its body. It's so fucking cool.
I got a goddamn plan.
Can you fly, you sucker? Can you fly? Splat.
Well, it just suddenly hit me, stampede.
And the final pro that I have, pro number 11, is the special effects are fucking phenomenal. Great practical effects, great use of miniatures, great use of hand puppets, great animatronics, great gore effects. Just overall, the special effects in this movie are absolutely stellar. There's a couple nitpicks that I have here and there, like a couple times when graboids breach out in the desert. It's obvious they're just ramming it through a styrofoam board with some dust and dirt on top of it. And the one moment in the basement shootout is that when Bert is facing the Graboid with his HK-91, which is the only time he ever uses that damn gun in the entire franchise. It's very obvious that it was a composite shot, but it was a quick shot, so it doesn't take you out of it so much. But when you see it, you immediately recognize it as a composite shot. But yeah, overall, the practical effects in this movie are absolutely stellar. The Graboids are very well constructed, very well detailed. They're totally by them as being giant monsters. Their hide looks super leathery and tough, which is what it would be supposed to be like, going all throughout this sand and rocks and nasty roots. The spikes on their side, which is what they use to move. They're inspired by worms. They have these stiff hairs on the sides of their body that allows them to move. Their heads are well detailed. They're very smooth and look kind of like bone, which they would need to be in order for them to tunnel through the dirt, kind of like killer whales. Their guts, like I said, great use of practical effects. The gore and slime that oozes out of the Tremors, yeah, totally. Tremors 3. That oozes out of the Graboid's mouth when the first one's killed is really, really fun to watch. There's lots of really good goopy and slimy sound effects that are used. I remember in the making of featurette that Alec and Tom kind of wanted to stay away from the use of slime when they were initially working on the effects, but then they just finally realized, okay, yeah, these monsters are kind of missing slime, so let's just start throwing that in, because they had just got done doing Aliens, which was heavy use of slime and goo and globular shit. But you know what? Never underestimate the value of slime. The hand puppet and animatronic effects are also very well done too. I didn't realize for a long time a lot of the basement shootout, the Graboid was a hand puppet.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think I don't know if they had Reba McEntire like standing in front of the miniature and then she backed away, but pretty much from the shot it bursts in, most of that whole scene is a practical puppet. I don't know if you watched it on the DVD or not, but they have a whole montage of them working on the miniatures.
Well, my copy of the Attack Pack didn't include the goddamn making of, so probably not.
And it was part of that too, but it was really cool because they showed like the final death scene and the basement shootout. It just so many great miniatures were used.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the special effects in the first Tremors movie are absolutely stellar, and they don't appear cheap either. Despite this movie not having a super big budget, I feel like the makers of this movie were just one of those teams that knew how to effectively use their money well. So that really makes me wonder, how would a Tremors movie made by James Cameron be?
Well, he probably thinks himself above it, but yeah, he definitely has the technical prowess to execute something spectacular.
Maybe somebody should ask James Cameron to do a Tremors movie after he's done with Avatar sequels. Whatever. Yeah.
We'll be waiting until like 2030 something.
Sadly. So yeah, other than that, the special effects are absolutely phenomenal. Like I said, there's a couple nitpicks. The one composite shot sticks out a little bit like sore thumb, but it's really quick, and I feel like they knew that it would stick out a little bit, which is why it's only on screen for maybe 3 seconds. And a couple times it's obvious that the Graboids are animatronics, especially when the one Graboid eats Walter. If you look carefully, you can see where the animatronic ends when it comes out of the floor. But there aren't super big. Oh, and there's another one where the tentacles are grabbing a hold of the horse, and in the corner of the screen, you can see a string that's pulling on the horse and the tentacles.
Oh yeah, I noticed that.
But they're, unless you're really, really looking, you won't really see them. They're really quick, minor little flaws in the effects. But overall, they're fucking spectacular. A 10 or $11 million budget was used very, very well with this movie. And again, it doesn't feel like they were being cheap. They were just using the effects sparingly, showing only enough to get the point across. And it paid off. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Any cons or nitpicks, Trev?
Well, I actually think with your pros, you did mention here and there small little nitpicks, which I tend to agree on. But no, there are really no major cons with this movie that I feel are worth mentioning. And realizing that, I think this. So, for those who don't know, Clash of the Titans, the Ray Harryhausen Swan Song, is my favorite movie, or what I consider to be my favorite movie. Tremors would be a very strong contender as possibly swapping out with that. They're very neck and neck, those two movies.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that's some high praise. That just goes to show, yeah, nothing about this really bothers me to the point where I would complain about it at any great length.
Like, I would say I kind of wish there was a couple more graboids so that we could see that goddamn elephant cannon be used a couple more times. And also, I wish that Burt would use it a couple more times throughout the rest of the franchise, because that thing seemed to be pretty effective in killing graboids. But when it is used, it's still awesome to see. But again, that's just kind of a little petty. But
and also the amount of graboids, except for Tremors 2, and even then we don't really see this amount. There's really only ever 4 or 3 or sometimes just 2. I think Tremors 5 only has 2 that we see, and one of them is focused on more than the other one. The other one's basically just there to be killed. But yeah, there's never really a whole lot of graboids.
Sadly. But again, that's just kind of a petty nitpick. So for me, myself, yeah, I got nothing either. I have no cons with this movie. It's pretty damn flawless. It has a few nitpicks, like we just said, but they're nothing that take away from the overall film experience with the original Tremors.
To be fair, we're also quite biased, so maybe somebody who's not as big a fan would probably find something that doesn't bother us, but that's their opinion.
Yes, that is their opinion. So, final thoughts on the original Tremors, or maybe you just gave yours?
Oh yeah, pretty much. Yeah, this is could very well swap out as my favorite movie of all time. That's how much I love it and how much it has impacted my creative and entertainment pursuits.
Well, for me, I love this movie. The original Tremors is a classic movie. It's, like I said, it's one of the greatest independent movies of all time. It's one of the greatest direct-to-video franchises of all time. It spawned one of my favorite franchises. I do consider as well to be one of my favorite films. Now, as we already stated, it's not my favorite in the franchise, but that's nothing bad against it. It's just the beginning of the franchise that I just like more of the sequels, even more of. Kind of like the original Rocky or the original Rambo. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. I just like the rest of the franchise even more. So my final rating will be a perfect solid 10 out of 10. It's a great film, great start to a great franchise. And it's just one of those. So it starts off really, really strong, and the only place where it can go is up from here, especially with the next movie.
Yes, and if it didn't need to be said, I'm also a 10 out of 10 for the movie.
Sweet. Isn't it nice when two people just talk about a gush about a movie they love?
Yeah, it's so much more fun than bitching about it.
Alrighty. Anything to plug before we end this, Trev?
Well, as always, check out thefictosphere.com because I'm a writer over there, but more specifically and a final return to form, I guess you'd say, I'm finally going to start up my videos again. And because I'm in a Tremors mood, thanks to these videos with Nick, I'm going to go through my Tremors collection, which includes the VHSs, the DVDs I have, and the Blu-rays, which are the most recent acquisition. And I'll probably spend the most time in that video on the Arrow set, the 30th anniversary set that was released this past December for the original Tremors. So yeah, expect that by the end of the week at the latest. I want to film it tonight, and however long it takes to put together, hopefully not very long, but yeah, it'll be either today or not today, tomorrow and or Friday. So yeah, expect another collection video, and expect there to be a frequency to them now that I've figured out how I want to do them. So yeah, be on the lookout for that on my channel. If you type in Trevor of Fictosphere, my channel should come up. You'll probably see a lot more videos I did with the Fictosphere guys, like podcasts and whatnot. But if you type Trevor of Fictosphere into the YouTube search, my channel probably will pop up because that's the nickname for it.
And then, yeah, go and check all that out. And thank you all for watching. Post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. Share this video with your friends. Go and join my Facebook group, Jackson Knight Productions Official, and be the nerd that you want to be. And look forward to tomorrow's episode where Trev and I tackle easily one of the best installments of the entire franchise with 1996's Tremors 2 Aftershocks. Look forward to that. And as always, if you're out in the middle of the desert and you see a large hump rolling towards you, Stampede! Stampede, Earl! Get out of the way! Get out of the way! Look out! And I'll see you guys in the next... Huh?
You dumb shit.
And I will see you guys in the next video.